Now, UK.
As we move on to some other news here, as we're learning, a second U.S. aircraft carrier is being sent to the Middle East. And here is what we're learning from the Associated Press. They're reporting that the United States will send the world's largest aircraft carrier to the Middle East to back up another already there, putting more American firepower behind President Trump's efforts to coerce Iran into a deal over its nuclear program. Here's some additional information. The USS Gerald R. Ford's planned deployment to the Mideast comes after Trump only days earlier suggested another round of talks with the Iranians was at hand. Those negotiations didn't materialize as one of Tehran's top security officials visited Oman and Qatar this week and exchanged messages with U.S. intermediaries. Already, Gulf Arab nations have warned any attack could lead to another regional conflict in a Mideast still recovering from the Israel-Hamas war in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Iranians are beginning to hold 40-day mourning ceremonies for the thousands killed in Tehran's crackdown on nationwide protests last month, adding to the internal pressure faced by the Islamic Republic. The Ford's deployment will put two carriers and their warships in the region. Already, the USS Abraham Lincoln and its guided missile destroyers are in the Arabian Sea. It marks a quick turnaround for the Ford, which President Trump sent from the Mediterranean Sea to the Caribbean last October as the administration built up a large military presence in that lead up to the surprise raid last month that captured then Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. President Trump said yesterday that he warned Iran that failure to reach a deal with his administration would be, quote, very traumatic. Iran and the United States held indirect talks in Oman last week, and President Trump said earlier this week that he was considering sending a second carrier strike group to the Middle East. President Trump held lengthy talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday and said he insisted to Israel's leader that negotiations with Iran need to continue. Netanyahu is urging the administration to press Tehran to scale back its ballistic missile program and end its support for militant groups such as Hamas and Hezbollah as part of any deal. The USS Ford set out on deployment in late June 2025, which means the crew will have been deployed for 8 months in 2 weeks' time. It is unclear how long the ship will remain in the Middle East, and the White House didn't immediately respond to a request for comment as of this morning. So we continue to follow that breaking news here as well. We are stepping away for a commercial break. My name is Christy Matino. Welcome in here to Live Now from Fox. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
The U.S. military is preparing for potential operations with Iran if President Trump orders an attack. Iran's top diplomat has arrived in Geneva ahead of what's being described as indirect talks with the U.S. tomorrow. For more, let's bring in CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. He joins us now from our Washington bureau. So, Charlie, you've been speaking with people about these U.S. preparations. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Lindsay's speaking with them every day, sometimes several times a day, to try to figure out what, from a military standpoint, what the game plan is. So there have been reports over the weekend, I can confirm those, that the United States could be preparing for a prolonged conflict. Of course, the United States is preparing for a prolonged conflict because the United States military prepares for any contingency, best case scenario to worst case scenario. And I'll tell you, there's nothing better than the Pentagon for preparing for worst case scenario. So the way it was described to me is you look at it as tiers. There are a number of targets, sort of surgical strikes that the United States, if President Trump decides and the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Pentagon and Secretary Hegseth decide that this is the plan to take surgical strikes within the regime itself, or you would take out missile launchers, or you would go after Iran's nuclear facilities, but you have to be prepared for retaliation. So if you really want to tell for what's going on there, you look at the Lincoln aircraft carrier that's been there for a few weeks, and it was ordered there because of the tensions rising in Iran. It's actually unique for that area's Central Command, CENTCOM, to not be without a carrier. Well, now there's a second one, and this is a significant move because they're moving the USS Gerald R. Ford from the Caribbean, where it was already extended. In fact, it's on, I think, its second extension now. So by the end of whatever this is, if it were to turn, as the military terms it, kinetic, that they would actually be engaged in a fighting war with Iran, you're looking at a carrier that is certainly looking down the barrel of one of the longest deployments, peacetime deployments for decades. So that suggests that you're going to have two carriers in the region, a number of F-18 fighter jets, F-35 fighter jets that comes with, a number of destroyers, because it's not just a carrier, but destroyers with guided missiles on there. So you are talking about a package that is preparing for the worst, and not only preparing to strike Iran, but preparing for the defense of U.S. forces in that area.
In news overseas, satellite imagery has confirmed the location of the USS Abraham Lincoln near Iran as Washington continues to put pressure on the country over its military program and recent deadly crackdown on protesters. US and Iranian officials are set to meet in Switzerland on Tuesday for a second round of talks. Iran says the meeting will focus on its nuclear program and the potential lifting of economic sanctions imposed by the US. Washington has previously indicated it wants to discuss the issue as well. The Abraham Lincoln, which leads a strike group with 3 guided missile destroyers, carries 90 aircraft, including F-35 fighters and 5,680 crew members, was reportedly deployed to the Gulf region in late January, but has not been seen in satellite imagery until now. It has been located off the coast of Oman, around 700 kilometers from Iran. The U.S. has also reportedly sent the USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest warship, to the Middle East, which could arrive in the region within the next 3 weeks.
West Asia is holding its breath. The United States is moving warplanes, warships, and missile defense systems into position as critical nuclear talks with Iran begin in Geneva. U.S. President Donald Trump is openly warning that if Iran refuses to back down on uranium enrichment, the next step could be military action, even regime change. Iran is responding with drills, drones, and threats of its own. Geneva meeting may decide whether this ends in a deal or a war. Here's more.
The United States is ramping up its war readiness across West Asia. Pentagon is moving air power into place, not only as a warning, but as a message that if diplomacy fails, America is ready. U.S. fighter jets and refueling tankers based in the United Kingdom are now being pushed closer to the region. More air defense systems are arriving. U.S. bases are being bolstered. There are already 40,000 soldiers in the region. Dozens of U.S. military cargo planes have been flying equipment into Jordan, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. Open source data shows more than 250 American cargo flights have poured into West Asia in recent weeks. Satellite images confirm 12 U.S. F-15 strike aircraft now sitting in Jordan, ready within range of Iran. At sea, the build-up is even more striking. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Group is already in the region. The USS Gerald Ford is now heading in. Each carrier brings destroyers, submarines, and the ability to launch Tomahawk cruise missiles deep into Iranian territory. President Trump has been blunt. He says Iran must stop enriching uranium. He wants limits on Iranian missiles. Trump has even suggested that regime change in Tehran may be the best outcome.
What are you expecting from these Iran talks in Geneva tomorrow?
So I'll be involved in those talks indirectly, and they'll be very important. We'll see what can happen. It's been typically, Iran's a very tough negotiator. They're good negotiators, or bad negotiators. I would say they're bad negotiators because we could have had a deal instead of sending the B-2s in to knock out their nuclear potential, and we had to send the B-2s. I hope they're going to be more reasonable. They want to make a deal.
But reports indicate U.S. leadership has no clear answer for what comes after. U.S. intelligence believes the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps could quickly fill the void, and that may create an even more dangerous Iran.
Look, doing a deal with Iran is not easy. said it yesterday, I'll repeat it again today. I mean, we have to understand that Iran ultimately is governed, and its decisions are governed by Shia clerics, radical Shia clerics, okay? These people make policy decisions on the basis of pure theology. That's how they make their decisions. So it's hard to do a deal with Iran. We've always said it's hard, but we're going to try. That's what the president is trying.
But Iran is not staying quiet. The supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has responded to repeated U.S. military threats against his country, saying that Iranian weapons that can sink American carriers are more dangerous than the warships.
The U.S. president keeps saying, our military is the strongest military in the world. The world's most powerful military can sometimes receive such a slap that it can no longer stay on its feet.
The IRGC has launched new military exercises, positioned drones, and issued a stark warning saying that any American attack will bring consequences. Iran fired missiles during the drill in the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian warships are in action, showing its readiness to take on American armada. Arab states in the Gulf are pushing for restraint, fearing a strike could set the entire region on fire. The region is waiting to see whether Geneva brings diplomacy or the opening shots of something far bigger. Bureau Report, WION, Wild is One.
وقتی که ما اعلام کلیر میکنیم منطقه رو اینها دیگه پشت تنگه میمونن. یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین.
Has fired back at the United States' scare tactics by closing off the world's most strategic oil shipping route for the first time since the 1980s. Supreme tyrant Ayatollah Ali Khamenei yesterday threatened to sink US warships in the Persian Gulf in another escalation of tensions amid nuke talks. Soon after, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard launched live-fire naval drills and closed the Strait of Hormuz in a rare show of force. It marks the first time the crucial Gulf choke point, through which 20% of the world's oil passes, has closed since the 1980s tanker wars between Iran and Iraq. Tehran has harassed shipping through the vital waterway in past times of tension and used naval mines to attack Iraqi vessels during the war. Global oil prices surged after threats to shut the strait during last year's 12-day war, when the US and Israel blitzed key nuclear and military sites. Iran and Russia will also be conducting Navy drills in the Sea of Oman and the northern Indian Ocean on Thursday, according to Iranian semi-official Fars news agency. Iranian Navy Commander Hassan Maghsoodloo said the exercises were being carried out over maritime security and safety concerns. It comes as Tuesday's round of talks over Iran's nuclear capabilities appear to provide something of a breakthrough. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi seemed optimistic after leading a delegation in Geneva, saying that a new window had opened for reaching an agreement. But he also declared that Iran remains fully prepared to defend itself against any threat or act of aggression, and that the consequences of an attack would not be confined to its borders.